Welcome to the Radical Libertarian, where we embark on a relentless quest for liberty, threading through contemporary events with radical libertarian lens. I'm your host, Jason Feimster, and today we're diving into a topic that stirs passion, debate, and division across the political spectrum: gun control. But we're not just scratching the surface. We're examining this contentious issue through the clear, unwavering eyes of libertarianism. In this episode, we're peeling back layers of rhetoric, law, and emotion to explore what gun control really means for individual liberty, personal responsibility, and the sanctity of our rights under the Constitution. It's a journey that will challenge conventional ideologies, provoke thought, and maybe, just maybe, change the way we view the world around us. Here at the Radical Libertarian, we don't shy away from tough conversations. We welcome them, because it's through these dialogues that we uncover truths often overshadowed by mainstream narratives. Our endeavor is straightforward yet profound: to propagate the essence of liberty in a world where it's increasingly under threat. So whether you're a staunch advocate for gun rights, a supporter of more stringent gun control, or somewhere in between, I invite you to join us on this exploration. Together we'll navigate the murky waters of gun legislation, historical context, philosophical debates, and the raw data that paints a picture of gun control's impact on society. But before we dive into the heart of today's topic, let me tell you a bit more about myself. I'm Jason Feimster, a voice for liberty, a seeker of truth, and a believer in the power of individual rights. Through this podcast, my goal is to light a path towards a freer world, where dialogue, respect, and an unwavering commitment to principles lead the way. Now let's set the stage for today's discussion on gun control. As libertarians, we hold dear the principle of minimal government intervention. We believe in the inherent right of individuals to live their lives as they see fit, as long as they do not infringe on the rights of others. And at the heart of this belief is the right to self-defense, a right enshrined in the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. But in a world where headlines often tell stories of violence and tragedy, the call for stricter gun control grows louder. It's a polarizing issue, one that seems to have a simple solution on the surface. Yet, as we'll discover, the implications of gun control run deep, touching the very core of our liberty. So prepare to embark on a journey through the lens of radical libertarianism as we dissect, discuss, and delve into the complex world of gun control. This is the Radical Libertarian, episode number 9, Gun Control, a Libertarian Examination. Let's begin. As we venture into the heart of our discussion on gun control, it's crucial to lay the foundation with a clear understanding of the libertarian stance on this issue. The Libertarian Party, known for its unwavering commitment to individual liberty and minimal government intervention, offers a perspective on gun control that is both principled and profound. According to the Libertarian Party platform, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. We oppose all laws at any level of government restricting, registering, or monitoring the ownership, manufacture, or transfer of firearms or ammunition. But what does this stance really mean? And why do libertarians hold such a firm line on gun rights? At its core, libertarianism champions the idea that every individual has the inherent right to live their life in a way they choose, so long as they do not infringe on the rights of others. This philosophy extends to the right of self-defense, seeing it as a fundamental to the preservation of liberty and personal safety. From a libertarian viewpoint, the ability to defend oneself, one's family, and one's property is not just a right, but a natural extension of individual autonomy. The argument goes beyond the practicalities of deterring crime or the specifics of self-defense scenarios. It's about the principle that a free individual should have the means to resist coercion, whether from other individuals or from an overreaching government. This perspective is deeply rooted in the historical context of the Second Amendment itself. The framers of the Constitution, fresh from a revolution against a tyrannical government, understood the importance of an armed populace. They envisioned a society where power remained with the people, and one of the safeguards against tyranny was the right to bear arms. Libertarians today see this not just as a relic of a bygone era, but as a timeless principle that remains relevant in the defense of liberty against modern threats. Critics often argue that in a world far removed from the muskets and militias of the 18th century, the libertarian stance on gun control is outdated or even dangerous. However, libertarians counter that the principle at stake is not about the type of weapons available, but the balance of power between the individual and the state. In an era where government capabilities for surveillance, control, and force have grown exponentially, the libertarian argument for the right to bear arms becomes not less, but more compelling. Furthermore, libertarians challenge the effectiveness of gun control laws in preventing crime. Citing studies and statistics, they argue that criminals, by definition, do not obey laws, including gun control laws. Thus, such regulations serve only to disarm law-abiding citizens, leaving them more vulnerable to those who pay no heed to the law dictates. This viewpoint emphasizes a broader libertarian critique of government interventions, which often have unintended consequences that undermine their intended goals. In discussing gun control, libertarians also highlight the importance of personal responsibility. The freedom to own and carry firearms comes with the solemn duty to use them wisely, safely, and ethically. This concept of responsibility is central to the libertarian ethos, which advocates for minimal government precisely because it believes in the capacity of individuals to govern their own lives and make moral choices. As we delve deeper into the nuances of gun control and its implications, keep in mind the libertarian foundation of this discussion. It's a perspective that champions liberty, respects individual autonomy, and questions the efficiency and morality of government-imposed restrictions. With this framework in place, we're ready to explore the historical context, the legislation, and the data surrounding gun control, all through the lens of radical libertarianism. To fully grasp the libertarian viewpoint on gun control, we must journey back in time to the framing of the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. Understanding its historical context is crucial, for it sheds light on the motivations and fears of the Founding Fathers, offering insights that resonate with the libertarian ethos today. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These words, succinct yet profound, were penned in a period of tumult and transition. The late 18th century was a time of revolutionary fervor, where the memory of struggle against British tyranny was fresh, and the desire for a government that would respect the rights of its citizens was paramount. The Second Amendment was born out of this desire, serving as a safeguard against the potential tyranny of the newly established federal government. Libertarians see the Second Amendment not merely as a historical artifact, but as a timeless principle that underscores the importance of an armed populace in safeguarding liberty. The framers understood that governments, no matter how well-intentioned, could become oppressive. They believed that one of the key checks on government power was an armed citizenry, capable of defending its rights and freedoms. This understanding is critical when examining the libertarian stance on gun control. For libertarians, the Second Amendment serves as a bulwark against government overreach. It's a reminder that the right to self-defense and the means to exercise it should remain in the hands of the people, not as a privilege granted by the state, but as an inalienable right that pre-exists government itself. Critics often argue that the founders could not have envisioned the technological advancements in weaponry that we see today. However, libertarians counter that the principle remains unchanged. The essence of the Second Amendment lies not in the specific types of arms, but in the balance of power it seeks to maintain between the individual and the state. This perspective is bolstered by historical examples where disarmament preceded oppression. Throughout history, numerous regimes have sought to disarm their populations, often with the pretext of promoting safety or security. Yet, these instances frequently led to the erosion of civil liberties and the imposition of tyranny. Libertarians argue that an understanding of history underscores the danger of allowing the state to monopolize the use of force. In the context of the United States, the Second Amendment also reflects a unique cultural heritage that values independence, self-reliance, and resistance to tyranny. This cultural aspect cannot be overlooked when discussing gun rights and control, as it shapes the attitudes and beliefs of many Americans regarding the role of firearms in society. As we move forward in our discussion, remember that the historical context of the Second Amendment is more than a backdrop. It's a critical component of the libertarian argument against gun control. It serves as a reminder of the inherent risk of concentrated power and the timeless value of individual rights. This historical perspective informs not only the libertarian view on gun control, but also a broader commitment to liberty, personal responsibility, and the skepticism of government authority that defines libertarianism. As we delve deeper into the complex tapestry of gun control, it's essential to understand the landscape of legislation that governs firearm ownership and use in the United States. This understanding not only provides a backdrop for our libertarian examination, but also highlights the evolving nature of the debate on gun rights versus gun control. The journey through gun control legislation begins with the National Firearms Act of 1934, one of the first federal statutes to regulate the manufacture, sale, and possession of firearms and certain types of ammunition. This act was primarily a response to the gangland crimes of the Prohibition era, marking the government's initial step into the realm of firearm regulation. From a libertarian perspective, this act set as the precedent for federal involvement in what many argue should be a matter of personal liberty and state regulation. Fast forward to 1968, a pivotal year in the history of gun control legislation with the passage of Gun Control Act. This legislation was largely a reaction to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert F. Kennedy. It aimed to regulate interstate commerce and firearms, including the prohibition of sales to certain categories of individuals, such as felons and the mentally ill. While the intent was to curb violence, libertarians critiqued this act for encroaching on individual rights and the autonomy of law-abiding citizens to own firearms for self-defense and other lawful purposes. In the years that followed, additional legislation sought to further regulate firearms, culminating in the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993. This act introduced mandatory background checks and waiting periods for handgun purchases from licensed dealers. Named after James Brady, who was shot and severely wounded during the assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan, the Brady Act represents a significant federal mandate on gun purchases. Libertarians often argue that while the intent behind the Brady Act is understandable, the effectiveness of such measures in preventing crime is debatable. Moreover, they express concerns about the potential for such regulations to become increasingly restrictive, infringing upon the constitutional rights of individuals. The debate over gun control legislation reached a new height with the Federal Assault Weapons Ban of 1994, which prohibited the manufacture, transfer, and possession of certain semi-automatic firearms and large-capacity magazines for civilian use. This ban, which expired in 2004, remains one of the most contentious pieces of firearm legislation, highlighting the divide between those who see it as a necessary measure for public safety and those who view it as an infringement on the Second Amendment. Libertarians typically fall into the latter category, arguing that the ban was not only an overreach of federal power, but also ineffective in reducing gun violence, as criminals often find ways to circumvent such laws. Throughout this legislative journey, the libertarian critique remains consistent. Laws that restrict gun ownership and use tend to infringe upon individual liberties without necessarily achieving their intended goals of reducing crime and violence. Moreover, libertarians caution against the slippery slope of gun control measures, fearing that each law paves the way for further restrictions. As we explore the impact of these laws on crime rates, individual freedom, and societal safety, it's vital to keep in mind the libertarian perspective. This viewpoint emphasizes the importance of balancing the desire for safety with the preservation of liberty and questions the efficiency of legislation in achieving its purported aims. With this critical lens, we move forward in our examination of gun control, armed with a deeper understanding of the legislative framework that shapes this ongoing debate. In the heart of our examination of gun control through a libertarian lens, we delve into a critical question. What is the impact of gun control on crime rates? This section of our discussion navigates through the complex interplay between legislation aimed at restricting gun ownership and its actual effects on societal safety. To begin, let's consider the foundational premise of libertarian thought on this matter: the belief in the inherent right of individuals to defend themselves, their families, and their properties. From this viewpoint, any legislation that infringes upon this right is not only a violation of personal freedoms, but also questionable in its effectiveness in reducing crime. Now let's explore the data and studies that shed a light on this contentious issue. Numerous research efforts have sought to understand the relationship between gun control laws and crime rates, with mixed feelings. However, libertarians point to several key studies that suggest stringent gun control laws do not necessarily lead to a decrease in crime. One pivotal aspect to consider is the distinction between correlation and causation. While some regions with strict gun control measures do experience lower rates of gun-related crimes, it's critical to scrutinize whether these outcomes are directly attributed to the laws themselves or to other factors, such as economic conditions, law enforcement practices, or societal norms regarding violence. Furthermore, libertarians highlight studies indicating that criminals intent on breaking the law are not deterred by regulations governing gun ownership. Instead, these laws often disarm law-abiding citizens, leaving them more vulnerable to criminal acts. The rationale is straightforward. When the populace is known to be unarmed, the risk faced by criminals diminishes, potentially making criminal endeavors more appealing. An often cited example within libertarian discourse is the comparison between cities or countries with stringent gun control laws and those with more permissive approaches to gun ownership. For instance, some cities with the most restrictive gun laws in the United States also struggle with high rates of gun violence, suggesting that factors beyond legislation play a significant role in crime dynamics. On the international stage, comparisons draw attention to countries like Switzerland, with high rates of gun ownership, yet low rates of gun-related crime, challenging the notion that more guns inherently lead to more crime. Libertarians argue that this underscores the importance of a responsible, well-armed populace in maintaining public safety. It's often important to discuss the concept of defensive gun use, a factor often overlooked in debates about gun control. Libertarians point to research indicating that firearms are used millions of times each year in the United States for self-defense, often without a shot being fired. This aspect of gun ownership, they argue, plays a crucial role in preventing crime, further complicating the narrative that more guns equal more crime. In dissecting the impact of gun control on crime rates, it's evident that the issue is far from black and white. The libertarian perspective, grounded in the values of individual freedom and skepticism of government intervention, challenges the efficiency of gun control measures in achieving their intended goal of reducing crime. Instead, libertarians advocate for a society where the right to self-defense is preserved, arguing that this is not only a matter of personal liberty, but also of public safety. As we continue our exploration on gun control from a libertarian examination, remember that the debate over its impact on crime rates is not just a matter of statistics and studies. It's a profound discussion about the balance between freedom and security, the role of government in our lives, and the intrinsic right of individuals to defend themselves. In our exploration of gun control through a libertarian lens, it's essential to ground our discussion in reality. Case studies from around the globe offer invaluable insights into the real-world implications of gun control laws. These examples, drawn from a variety of countries with differing approaches to gun legislation, illuminate the complex relationship between such laws, individual liberty, and public safety. Let's delve into a few key case studies that highlight the impact of gun control measures in different settings. Case Study 1. Australia's National Firearms Agreement. In 1996, following the tragic Port Arthur massacre, Australia implemented the National Firearms Agreement, NFA, drastically tightening gun control laws. The NFA included a gun buyback program that led to the surrender of over 600,000 firearms. Proponents argue that since the implementation of the NFA, Australia has seen a significant decrease in gun violence and no mass shootings of the scale seen at Port Arthur. Libertarians, however, point to the nuances in the data, emphasizing that the decline in homicide rates was part of a longer-term trend that predates the NFA. Moreover, they argue that the focus on mass shootings, while important, overlooks the broader spectrum of crime and violence, including personal safety and the right to self-defense. From a libertarian perspective, the Australian case raises questions about the trade-offs between legislative action and individual freedoms, suggesting that the effectiveness of gun control measures should be assessed in a broader context of overall crime rates and personal liberty. Case Study 2. Switzerland's Tradition of Firearms Freedom. Switzerland presents an interesting contrast to the Australian model. Known for its permissive gun laws and high rates of gun ownership, Switzerland also boasts one of the lowest rates of gun-related crimes in the world. This juxtaposition challenges the notion that high gun ownership inherently leads to higher crime rates. Libertarians often cite Switzerland as evidence that responsible gun ownership, cultural factors, and a well-regulated militia system can coexist with low levels of gun violence. The Swiss case underscores the importance of considering cultural and societal variables in the discussion of gun control, suggesting that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to the issue of gun violence. Case Study 3. The United Kingdom's strict gun laws. The United Kingdom enacted stringent gun control measures in the late 20th century, culminating in essentially banning handguns following the Dunblane School Massacre in 1996. Advocates of the UK's gun control policy point to the low number of gun-related homicides and the rarity of mass shootings as evidence of its success. However, libertarians highlight the increase in other forms of violent crime and question the effectiveness of gun control laws in ensuring public safety. They argue that while gun violence may have decreased, the UK experiences significant rates of knife crime and other violence, raising concerns about the displacement effect, where the absence of firearms leads to an increase in other forms of violence. This case study prompts a broader discussion on the nature of violence and the role of firearms in societal safety. These case studies reveal the complexity of the gun control debate and the difficulty of drawing simple conclusions. Australia, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom each offer unique insights into the ways that different societies approach the balance between individual liberties and public safety. For libertarians, these examples underscore the importance of a nuanced approach that considers cultural, historical, and societal factors. They challenge the efficiency of one-size-fits-all solutions and highlight the potential unintended consequences of strict gun control measures. Most importantly, they reaffirm the libertarian belief in the fundamental right to self-defense and the dangers of ceding too much power to the state. As we continue our exploration of gun control from a libertarian perspective, these case studies serve as a reminder of the real-world implications of policy decisions. They invite us to question, analyze, and engage in deeper conversations about the best ways to ensure both public safety and the preservation of individual freedoms. As we delve further into the libertarian examination of gun control, it becomes imperative to explore a cornerstone of libertarian thought, the philosophy of self-defense. This principle is not merely a policy stance, but a profound expression of the value libertarians place on life, liberty, and property. Understanding this philosophy sheds light on why libertarians passionately defend the right to bear arms, viewing it as essential to the protection of individual rights. The moral foundation of self-defense. At its core, the libertarian philosophy of self-defense is rooted in the moral imperative to protect one's life and the lives of others. Life is seen as the most fundamental right, from which all other rights derive. Libertarians argue that every person inherently possesses the right to defend this life against aggression, whether from other individuals or the state. This right to self-defense is considered natural and inalienable, existing independently of any government or legal system. The extension to property and liberty. Libertarians extend the concept of self-defense beyond the protection of physical life to include property and liberty. Property, in the libertarian view, is an extension of the self, representing one's labor, time, and freedom. Thus, defending one's property is tantamount to defending one's liberty and life. Libertarians hold that individuals have the right to use force, if necessary, to protect their property from theft, vandalism, or intrusion, seeing this as a natural extension of the right to self-preservation. The role of firearms in self-defense. Firearms are considered by libertarians to be an equalizing force in the realm of self-defense. They provide a means for individuals, regardless of physical strength or capability, to effectively defend themselves and their property against aggression. The possession of a firearm is seen as a practical tool for ensuring that the right to self-defense can be exercised, enabling individuals to protect themselves against more powerful aggressors, including tyrannical governments. The ethical use of force. Libertarian philosophy places strict limits on the use of force in self-defense. Force may only be used as a response to immediate and unjust aggression, and must be proportionate to the threat posed. This ethical framework seeks to balance the right to self-defense with the respect for the rights of others, emphasizing non-aggression as a core value. Libertarians argue that the moral and responsible use of firearms for self-defense is consistent with the principle of non-aggression, as it involves defending against rather than initiating violence. The dangers of disarmament. From a libertarian viewpoint, disarmament, whether by law or coercion, represents a fundamental threat to the right of self-defense. Restrictive gun control measures are seen as undermining the ability of individuals to protect themselves, transferring power from the citizenry to the state. Libertarians caution against historical examples where disarmament has preceded oppression, viewing the right to bear arms as a safeguard against tyranny. The philosophy of self-defense is a testament to the libertarian commitment to individual rights and autonomy. It underscores the belief that individuals not only have the right, but also the responsibility to protect themselves, their families, and their property. In the context of the gun control debate, this philosophy provides a foundational argument against measures that would restrict the lawful ownership and use of firearms. As we consider the various facets of the gun control debate, the libertarian philosophy of self-defense invites us to reflect on the fundamental values of liberty, responsibility, and the sanctity of life. It challenges us to consider the implications of our policy choices on the ability of individuals to defend those values against aggression, ensuring that the rights to life, liberty, and property are preserved for all. As we approach the culmination of our discussion on gun control from a libertarian perspective, it's crucial to examine the intricate relationship between gun control, government power, and individual liberty. This nexus is where libertarian concerns over gun control laws find their most profound expression. The libertarian critique of gun control is not solely about the right to own firearms, but about the broader implications of such regulations on the balance of power between the state and the individual. The concentration of power. Libertarians view government power with inherent skepticism. rooted in the understanding that power tends to concentrate and expand over time. This expansion of power often comes at the expense of individual freedoms. Gun control laws are seen through the lens as a mechanism by which the state can further consolidate its power, diminishing the capacity of individuals to resist or challenge that power. The central libertarian worry is that by disarming the citizenry, gun control laws effectively remove a critical check on government overreach, making it more difficult for individuals to protect their freedoms against potential tyranny. The principle of self-ownership and autonomy. At the heart of libertarianism is the principle of self-ownership, the idea that individuals own themselves and have the sovereign right to control their bodies and lives. This principle extends to the right of individuals to defend themselves and their property. Gun control laws, particularly those that significantly restrict or outright ban the ownership of firearms, are seen as infringing on this fundamental right. By limiting the means by which individuals can defend themselves, the state infringes on their autonomy and self-determination. The historical context of disarmament. Libertarians often point to historical instances where governments disarmed their populations only to later engage in oppression or genocide. This disarmament of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, Jews in Nazi Germany, and more recent examples in other parts of the world are cited as cautionary tales. These historical precedents underscore the libertarian argument that an armed populace is the bulwark against tyranny. They argue that while not every instance of disarmament leads to tyranny, the disarmament of the populace consistently precedes the worst abuses of power. The illusion of safety. One of the primary justifications for gun control is the promise of increased public safety. However, libertarians challenge this assumption, questioning the efficiency of gun control measures in actually reducing crime and violence. They argue that criminals, by definition, do not obey laws, including gun control laws. Thus, such regulations primarily disarm law-abiding citizens, leaving them more vulnerable to crime. Furthermore, libertarians contend that the state cannot guarantee the safety of its citizens, and by disarming them, it not only fails to protect, but also removes individuals' ability to protect themselves. The right to resist. The libertarian stance on gun control is inextricably linked to the right to resist oppression. This does not merely encompass the defense against criminal aggression, but also the defense against tyrannical government. The right to bear arms is seen as a last resort, a means by which citizens can defend their liberties against a government that has overstepped its bounds. While the prospect of needing to resist government tyranny may seem remote to some, libertarians argue that the preservation of this right is essential for the maintenance of a free society. The Libertarian Examination of gun control, government power, and the liberty reveals deep-seated concerns about the balance of power in society. For libertarians, the issue of gun control transcends the specifics of policy debates, touching on fundamental principles of liberty, autonomy, and the right to self-defense. It's a dialogue that challenges us to consider the broader implications of our policy choices on individual freedoms and the nature of government authority. As we reflect on the various perspectives presented in this discussion, it's clear that the libertarian critique of gun control offers a vital perspective in the ongoing debate over the rights and responsibilities of individuals in society. It reminds us of the importance of vigilance in the protection of liberty and the careful consideration of the means by which we seek to ensure public safety and order. As we draw this exploration to a close, it's time to reflect on the ground we've covered today. Our journey through the libertarian examination of gun control has taken us from the philosophical underpinnings of individual liberty and self-defense to the practical considerations of government power and public safety. We've traversed historical landscapes, scrutinized legislation, and dissected case studies, all through the lens of radical libertarianism. We began with a fundamental question. What role, if any, should government play in regulating firearms? From the libertarian perspective, the answer leans heavily towards minimal intervention. This stance is rooted not in a simplistic glorification of firearms, but in a deep-seated belief in the principles of autonomy, self-ownership, and the right to defend one's life, liberty, and property. The historical context of the Second Amendment provided us with a backdrop against which the American discourse on gun rights and control unfolds. We saw how this amendment, born out of a desire to protect against tyranny, resonates with libertarians today as a safeguard of individual freedom. Our examination of gun control legislation and its impact on crime rates challenged us to question the efficiency of such laws in achieving their intended goals. Through case studies from Australia, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom, we explored how different societies have navigated the complex interplay between gun control measures and the rights and safety of their citizens. The philosophy of self-defense emerges as a core tenet of libertarian thought, highlighting the moral imperative to protect oneself and the ethical considerations that accompany the right to bear arms. This discussion underscored the libertarian argument that disarmament, whether by law or coercion, poses a threat not only to personal safety, but to the balance of power between the individual and the state. As we delved into the relationship between gun control, government power, and liberty, we confronted the libertarian fear of concentrated power and the historical precedents that justify such concerns. The debate over gun control was revealed to not only about guns themselves, but about the broader principles of freedom, authority, and the role of government in society. In concluding our discussion, it's essential to recognize that the libertarian perspective on gun control is but one voice in a multifaceted debate. Yet it offers a crucial reminder to the value of liberty and the importance of scrutinizing government interventions that may infringe upon individual rights. Whether one agrees or disagrees with the libertarian viewpoint, engaging with it enriches the discourse, challenging us to consider the implications of our policy choices on the fabric of freedom. As we part ways, I invite you, the listeners, to reflect on the themes we've explored today. Engage with the ideas, challenge them, and contribute to the ongoing dialogue. The pursuit of liberty is a shared journey, one that requires vigilance, thoughtfulness, and a willingness to explore diverse perspectives. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Radical Libertarian. Our quest for liberty continues, and I look forward to embarking on that journey with you again. Until next time, stay free, stay informed, and keep the spirit of liberty alive.